After years of anticipating Space Engineers 2 and excitedly waiting to check out the game myself, a game which currently has a very positive rating on Steam by the way, has actually left me regretful of playing it, and despite being an avid fan of the first game and the genre, I'll tell you why you should probably leave this on the wish list for at least the next 12 months. Now, I do want to preface this by saying this isn't for the die-hard fans of the first game. You guys already know what you're getting, you're already enjoying it. This video is for the prospective buyers who don't yet own Space Engineers 1, let alone Space Engineers 2, and if you don't own Space Engineers 1, you should definitely buy it, as it's a complete experience compared to Space Engineers 2 and is awesome in all respects. Now, my love of Space Engineers began in 2013. It was this new, lesser known game that released in open development to the tune of about $15, and nothing like this had really been done before. It was just a bare bones game with the ability to build ships creatively and fly them into other ships, a bit like what we have in Space Engineers 2 currently. But over the course of 6 years, Space Engineers flourished and has become this incredible game, one that I have hundreds of hours in, harvesting resources, building ships, automating the building of ships, and of course flying them around, battling other enemy ships, or if that wasn't fun enough for me, flinging the ships into planets to see them explode, causing massive craters. And I still fondly remember the experience. To this day, it has a player base and receives regular updates, and that is a testament to what the team have developed, and my hope was that Space Engineers 2 would update the look and feel of the game in its early release, followed by the release of new features such as survival mode and water physics further down the line. And jumping into Space Engineers 2, it's clear that the game feels renewed and the new engine really shines with gorgeous graphics, with a lot of that down to better lighting and shadows. It's a beautiful looking game, but in its current alpha state, I'm able to run the game on both high and extreme settings with between 22 and 30 FPS at 4K resolution. But even if I bring the settings down to medium settings on my 3080 Ti, it seems to be capped at 30 FPS regardless of the display size, and though I don't need 120 FPS, capping at 30 makes the game feel jerky at times. And all of this is before I start building, making it clear the game isn't well optimized. One of my biggest gripes is actually upon opening the game, we're introduced to this page which explains the alpha experience, and under user friendly it mentions that the game has been redesigned to be more intuitive, easier to learn and simpler to use for both newcomers and veterans, which simply isn't true. I say this critically because I consider myself a new player, having not played Space Engineers 1 in a couple of years now, and I'm just left confused. There's no tutorial in its alpha stage, and very little is shown on screen except when building. Even then, not everything is displayed, which means you'll occasionally press the wrong button. For example, Ctrl Z undoes the most recent build piece, but if you press Ctrl X, you cut the ship you're working on, and before you know it, if you press cancel, you cancel the action and you've deleted your ship, unaware that you can then use Ctrl V to paste it again. It's just little things like this that I feel need adding, and actually jumping back into Space Engineers 1 to get some B-roll for this video helped me a lot because I had to redo the tutorial in order to do what I wanted to do. And so I've learnt more from that than actually playing Space Engineers 2. My issue isn't with the feature here. In fact, the features are fantastic in the game, and the new ones as well, such as blueprints, which we'll talk about shortly. But of the lack of tutorial and information, It just makes it very hard for non-veterans of the genre to pick up and play. Quite the contrast to Space Engineers 1 and its in-game tutorials, and this user-friendly challenge to overcome could easily turn off new players, and I've found myself having to go back and forth between the help page to look at the control mapping, which we shouldn't have to do, or to go onto the YouTube channel to find out how to do something. That being said, once you get the hang of the controls and start to build, the system does feel great. They are definitely making improvements to the system, and though I'm just getting started with playing about with the blueprints, they're simple to set up and use. The undo and redo buttons are fantastic, although I don't think the mapped keys are right, like I mentioned. Using control for this makes it easy to misclick other keys, and the hold control to make adjustments means I'm frequently clicking the wrong keys. We also have access to the large 2.5 meter and the 0.5 meter blocks, as well as a new 25 centimeter decorational build piece, with the smallest being a detailing cube. This is great for adding minute detail to your ship's exteriors and interiors, and I really like the flexibility of this, even if I do struggle from time to time with the gaps being in the wrong spot when playing between the different grids. But the problem is, despite these additions, we're left with an experience that's devoid of life, and that was justifiable for Space Engineers when it first released. But Space Engineers 2 is building on the success of its predecessor. If they wanted to test those systems, they could have applied them to Space Engineers. After all, it's still being updated. Instead, the team have released what's more akin to a glorified engine showcase. Yes, you can build and fly ships, but it's bare bones. You can't fire the one weapon they've added to the game, and though you can use the drills, it quickly feels less like a game and more like a slideshow. What's worse is the lack of any ship functions outside of flying. I'm not talking about the logic that we have access to in Space Engineers 1, though I do know that that'll come to Space Engineers 2 eventually, but you can't do basic things like opening or closing doors or use the buttons provided. I'm not a developer, I don't know how this all works, I'm just a gamer, but I feel these were things that if you're going to implement and add into the game, they should be ready to play with. And don't get me started on the lack of buildables that you see here. This list here, this is all of them. Don't get me wrong, I'm obviously sounding like I'm hating a lot. I don't hate the game. I really like Space Engineers. I really like what Space Engineers 2 will become. I'm excited for the future of this game, and I know I'm going to have fun with the survival slice being added, allowing me to make use of assemblers and refineries among lots of other buildables to create mini factories in space, but that's over a year away. And though they may add the occasional new buildable here and there, it feels like they're starting right back at square one rather than experimenting with new features in the current game. A bit like how Hello Games is trialing features in No Man's Sky for their next game, Light No Fire. And it leaves me wondering, why have Keen Software gone down this route? Had they waited until Slice 2 or 3, I could understand wanting feedback from the community, but they already know what the community wants when it comes to building ships, as they've had 12 years of experience up until this point. So, does it come down to money for the continued development? And if so, I would have much have preferred them being straight with us about that. Regardless, in the future, Space Engineers 2 has the potential to be amazing. We know they know what they're doing, and they've made some really big promises with what they want for Space Engineers 2, and we're just going to have to trust them on this journey. If you're a die-hard fan, you've no doubt already bought Space Engineers 2, but for everyone else, especially new players who are interested in Space Engineers, please go purchase the first game, enjoy that. Or if not, just wait a year or two for this one to mature. That being said, if you would like me to check out the building more in depth and work on some beautiful ships rather than this cobbled up mess, do let me know in the comments below, and perhaps we'll have a guide or two whilst we wait. Until then, I'll be hurtling stuff at these stations or playing with the new destruction tool, which looks pretty cool, by the way. Anyway, thanks as always does go to all of our amazing supporters on Patreon, most notably our Lunar Eclipse Patrons, Firefless, The Calamity, Ben, Star and Seeker Kala, as well as our Blood Moon of the day, which today is Saltran Husky. Until next time, as always, ciao for now.